Hi, I'm Spencer Dinwiddie, guard from the Brooklyn Nets, and you're watching Ain't Hard to Tell.
All right, welcome to Ain't Hard to Tell podcast, episode 34. I'm going to call this the Charles Oakley episode, Shaq episode. I don't know what you want to call it.
Why not Noah Syndergaard? Is there a famous net that wore 34 back in the day?
Devin Harris.
Devin Harris.
Okay,
there you go.
we
That's
go.
good. There we go. And the person who gave
Devin
you
Harris.
that information is our guest, Robert Windrem. I call him Bob, so I like to shorten it up and call him Bob. He is the editor of Netsdaily.com, which Bryan and I have done tons of work for. And he's also an investigative reporter for NBC News for their investigative bureau. Bob, welcome to the podcast, man.
Good to be here.
We are glad to finally have you here. We've been wanting to have you for quite some time.
Yes.
We got you here.
We saved it for the draft and free agency.
Draft, free agency, Nets. A lot of Nets fans have been asking for this. You are,
Oh.
yeah. I don't know how good that is all the time. You are a popular man among the Nets community. Although what I realized when I started working for Netsdaily was a lot of people had no idea what you look like.
No, and I like to keep it that way. I was thinking of coming here with a mask and a cape, but Bryan said no.
But
He's actually serious.
He's actually serious. Although he's been in a couple videos with me, and then the whole, you look like Wolf Blitzer. I look like Dwight Howard.
Wolf, right. I used to know Wolf, yes.
So
The best I got was, I forgot the dude from Backstreet Boys or NSYNC. I don't remember his name. And then there's a Cruz from Coach Carter when I had an afro.
I could see that. we all have our lookalikes.
That was back in the day.
Bob, before we get into stuff with you, obviously doing a lot of coverage on the Nets. You oversee everything with Netsdaily.com. NBA draft just finished. We're just a couple days away from NBA draft when we're recording this. What did you like about what the Nets did on the NBA draft, and how do you think that impacts them in free agency?
First of all, I don't think it impacts the free agency that much. I mean, these two guys are development guys. One just turned 19, will be this, when he takes the court, he will be the second youngest Net in the team's history. That's Janin Musa. And the other guy is only about a year older. These are long-term development guys. This is not about, it's not about what they're going to do in free agency. These are guys who you'll have for 4 years to develop. You can be very patient with. You can send them to the G League and bring them back, and they're good picks considering they're at 29 and 40 in a draft that was pretty good.
Right.
So I mean, and they're both. The other thing about them is Musa in particular has a real personality.
Yeah.
I don't know how good he's going to be on the court, but Bryan and I were at the press conference the other day, and he's just extremely impressive. I mean, as a personality, he interrupted Sean Marks at one point. Marks was like,
They asked him about what kind of, something along the lines of what position could he play.
what kind of player is he?
Yeah, and then Musa was like, I could play point guard or whatever, and then Marks just kind of was like, he stuck his hand out and deferred to him, made a face. It was actually really funny.
Yeah, and he's very funny. He has a history that no other Net has. He was a national hero in Bosnia when he was the MVP for the FIBA Europe Under-16 tournament. And he just dominated it. And Bosnia was still in the throes of coming out of a war.
Yeah.
And he was a unifying force. And they had 50,000 people in the streets of Sarajevo. He's up on the podium. He's got the award. He was literally a national hero and a unifying force at age 16 in Bosnia. I mean, he's literally a fascinating guy. Do I know how he's going to be? I don't know.
What do you, I've looked at stuff on him, game footage, stuff like
same
that. What do you like about his game? He looks like he can shoot the ball pretty well, can help him stretch the floor at his size. What do you like about his game?
He's very aggressive. He has a scorer's mentality. I mean, he's somebody who, and he also can pass, and he's a good ball handler, and he's 6'9" and may still be growing. He says he can play the 1, the 2, or the 3, and he's probably right. At what level, we don't know.
Right.
But, he can handle the ball, he can shoot, he's been doing it, he was one of the youngest players ever in the EuroLeague, 16 years old. And he has, as a result, a great deal of confidence. He is very cocky. And that is not something you see on the Brooklyn Nets.
No,
His favorite player
that
is
is
Kobe.
not.
Yeah,
His favorite player is Kobe?
He's a killer.
I like
Yes.
He's a killer. He kills everyone. That was the
That's
quote.
what he said.
Quote? I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
See,
And
that
that's
that
who he
excited
is.
me.
Yeah, that's
All
who
right,
he
now,
is.
all right, so
I
Nets
mean,
fans can be excited about
Corix is more of an old soul, as somebody said. He's, his English is not as good. It's fine, but his English is not as good as Moose's. And this is a guy who had a lot of potential. I mean, a year ago, Draft Express had him as a potential lottery pick.
Yes, they did.
So,
yes, they did.
I mean, but he had a big buyout, but that's been settled. And the Nets are going to, apparently on July 6th, are going to give him a 4-year deal with essentially end of first round money, which they didn't have to do.
They didn't. I like his upside a lot. I do. I like that pick for the Nets a lot. I even seen mocks where he's supposed to go higher than 29. So I really like that. I like that
He
pick.
was
for
as
him a lot.
high as 16.
I saw
20.
that 16,
Yeah.
in the 16 to 20 range is where I saw him a lot.
Right.
So I thought that
Are we
was good.
surprised that they stayed there though? Like staying because there was all the talk. Obviously,
Well,
we put
Mark-
some of that out there as well.
Yeah.
Mark's hinted about that in his discussion with Evan Roberts and Joe Benigno. He said that they were close, that they had offers. Now, he did not detail what those offers were, but what he did say was, I like my veteran players a lot. So that would suggest that there were offers to move up, and that the other side of the deal would have been one of the Nets' veteran players, whether that would have been DeMauri Carroll, Spencer Dinwiddie,
Right.
Jeremy Lin, I doubt, but he had at least an offer. And I think the other thing that Evan asked him was, might you be saving some of these pieces for something that comes down the line as a trade? He didn't go there, which suggests that he might go there.
But it makes more sense. It makes more sense for especially for DeMauri Carroll, for example, who's an expiring contract. I mean, really, you should trade him in February, especially if by then you're out of the playoff race. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
And with Spencer Dinwiddie's contract about to come up, and Rodney Hollis-Jefferson's contract about to come up, and D'Angelo Russell's, you're going to have to do something there that kind of creates opportunity moving forward.
Yeah.
So with Spencer Dinwiddie
Yeah,
or
I mean-
Rodney Hollis-Jefferson,
Spencer's still only 25. D'Lo is 22.
yeah.
Point is, there's time. There's no need. There's not really need to rush right now.
And we're not saying trade them.
We're not saying that either. We're
But-
just saying a move will be made. I think we all can agree
This
on
is
that.
a business at the end of the day, which Spencer Dinwiddie cryptically tweeted about the other day.
Yeah,
So
it's-
there's
yeah.
that.
And he may know some, but I mean, Jared Allen was in a tweet the other day, said the players don't know anything about what's going on, and they usually don't.
don't?
Maybe they'll get a little more of a word before Woj does.
Yes.
But oftentimes it's not very much in advance.
That is the business.
I mean, the great when Darren Williams was traded, somebody asked him at the press conference.
Did you say the great Darren Williams?
Of course I did. I may have been sarcastic, but I'll
Yeah.
just let it go.
That's the only way to be on that.
But when
Do have a
Darren,
Utah Jazz fan
right,
here.
when Darren Williams was traded, and he was asked at the Nets press conference, "Who told you you've been traded?" And he looked in his very Darren Williams sarcastic way and said, "Rick Bucher of ESPN." he was in the players' lounge, and he looked up, and there was the story, and that's how we found out.
Damn.
So, I mean, in some cases, players will find out. In other cases, they won't. Dwight Howard this week said that he had not talked to the Hornets. 2 days after the deal, the Hornets were on that
Dexter
call.
doesn't believe that.
I don't believe that after the video he posted where he only had Nets highlights. I wasn't buying that. I thought
That
that
was
was
a
Note,
bizarre-
on that note, do you think that he knew that they were going to negotiate a buyout right after?
probably not at the point he put that video out, but I think shortly later he probably found out.
Look,
I think he knew he was coming to Nets though. I
He
think so.
claims
Yeah.
claims that
That's my
that
conspiracy theory.
he makes a veiled claim that it was his idea for the buyout, but there were little hints in that. There were little hints in that would suggest not.
Agreed.
Among them was the fact that he said, "I don't need people talking to me about my past." Well,
Who was talking to you about the past?
yeah,
That's what I want to know.
Nobody was because nobody was talking to you about the future.
It's the future. Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's a lot to be said there. We talked a little bit of Nets, but let's get into you. We know that you obviously run everything in Netsdaily, but you're also an investigative reporter for NBC. It doesn't seem like sometimes those two worlds are matched, although I've worked in news and sports, so we know it can be done.
this team is owned by a Russian oligarch.
Yeah. Anything is
Need
possible.
I say more?
Yes.
Right.
Anything is possible. Tell us a little about your story in journalism, how you got to NBC and then doing stuff with Netsdaily.
I graduated with a degree in communications from Seton Hall University. I did a little graduate school in American Studies. I went into the Air Force for a little while. I worked at several New Jersey newspapers. I worked for Ralph Nader as a Nader's Raider for a year and a half in Washington. And then ultimately I wound up at NBC starting in 1980. So I've been an investigative reporter for NBC News producer since August of 1980.
So you've seen the rise and fall of newspapers, and we got into this with Howard Beck a while ago.
We did.
And I just kind of want your perspective on that, because you've obviously seen, sort of that happen and the newspaper industry cannibalize itself. And as somebody in their 20-somethings writing for a newspaper, I kind of want to know what I'm dealing with here.
They didn't get the internet, and there'll be some people tell you they still don't get the internet. And that was one of the issues. They didn't get it as a alternative source of news. They didn't get it as a function of what they did, and they really didn't get it in terms of their advertising.
Yes.
That the advertising was just not going there, and that's the big issue. I mean, things like Craigslist took away the classified ads, and then a variety of display ads wound up in online. But when I walked out of the last newspaper I worked for, which was the New Brunswick Home News, which really no longer exists anymore, in 1977, I thought for sure that the next job after I went down to work for Ralph Nader's group I would be coming back to a newspaper job. It never happened.
And you haven't been back. You haven't been in print ever.
No, I haven't been in print since for 40 years. So I'm giving away roughly my age. But
With that being said, right, and then you started with Nets. What year did you start with Netsdaily?
I started in Netsdaily in 2005.
2005.
Yes. John Schumann, now with NBA.com, had founded Netsdaily, and basically ran it himself. And he and his wife were expecting a child, and he asked me if I could fill in for 2 weeks.
Clearly that didn't happen.
His daughter is now a teenager,
Oh.
and the 2 weeks this will be my 14th season coming up. It's the site's 15th.
Did you ever, especially what Bryan asked about print, and you're working on a site in 2005? Did you ever see these fan sites like Netsdaily, like we see all across SB Nation, sort of becoming what they've become? Extremely popular, a lot of fan engagement.
More
with
popular in many ways than the newspapers that cover them. But the newspapers have an advantage, which is they travel.
Right.
They travel with the team. That's not something we can afford. But all that said, so what you want to do in the competitive nature is you want to be able to break stories in your own, and you also want to have a really steady stream of stuff, which is what we do. I mean, we have several stories a day. I mean, stories that newspapers and their associated website might put into a larger story. I mean, for example, I found out last night at 1 o'clock in the morning that the Nets have signed, and I'm going to screw up this pronunciation, here we go, Ding Yang Huang, the MVP of the Chinese Basketball Association.
I think you nailed it.
Right.
Better than I would have done.
Right. Thank you. But
I'll just call him Ding.
so I see that. I mean, and we do a separate story on that. I mean, it's a fun piece, and we did a separate story on Musa. We did a separate story on Curix.
Yep.
We did a story on the press conference. We broke down what Marks and Atkinson said on WFAN in a separate story. We did a story based on Greg Logan of Newsday's interview with Jeremy Lin. I mean, this is just in the last few days. And that's what differentiates us. But what I think that does is it keeps people coming back, and you combine that with social media, where we're very active,
Yes.
particularly on Twitter, and you develop, I think, more of a loyalty. We now have 22,000 Twitter followers as of last week. If Lynn gets traded, we're done. There'll be a massive exodus, just as there was a great move when he came. But all the kidding
still have
aside,
D'Angelo.
that's right. Almost as popular, by the way.
Yeah.
Is that people gravitate to us, and the other thing is that we have that the newspapers, for the most part, don't have, is we have the comments
Yes.
that permit fans to, for better
Better
or
or
worse,
worse, yep.
comment on what the news is.
Right.
And I think that the reality is that's a big help. And by the way, what I have also found out is that within that, we have been able to find members of the Netsdaily community who have become like minor reporters or junior reporters or part-time reporters, whatever you want to call them.
No, they
and
have.
they're right, and they become part of the community. I mean, GNYR, Jose, I have
Yep.
not met him.
Yep. I have.
Right, well, I have not. And, I mean, he was tracking for us the workouts. I mean, Sean Marks and the Nets do not reveal who's working out for them. But he was able to identify like 64 college players and international players who had worked out in ways that, and I think I'm pretty good at monitoring Twitter and Google, et cetera.
Some people are on another level.
That's right.
There's levels to everything.
But I found
There's also
Ding.
only so much you can do.
You did.
I found Ding, but that was at 1 o'clock in the morning. He was probably asleep. But I think that those are the things. I mean, and there have been, over the years, there have been a number of people like that. And, one of the other things that we have is, the Brooklyn Brigade was developed out of a group of Netsdaily commenters.
Which I found out.
Right.
And I will say this before we go to our first break: the Netsdaily fan base, and just when I started doing video work for Netsdaily, I met you 5 years ago, and we started doing it. The interaction with you, the comments were great for me because I got to see what worked, what didn't work, what fans liked in terms of video stuff, and then I would see fans at the games. And there's so many of them I know. And I've seen over the years. I've seen in a restaurant.
Yeah, they would come
and
up
food.
to you.
And it's crazy. That stuff has been crazy to
do that,
me
yeah.
because I've met people in restaurants, in bars. And
I was in a casino in Atlantic City, and somebody came up to me and said, "You're net income, aren't you?" My wife was like, "What is this?"
yeah, which is weird. But
How does your wife feel about all that?
She's a bird watcher. I don't watch birds. She doesn't. She doesn't write for it, but she's very perceptive. I tell the story. We had courtside seats one night, and she decided she would come. It was a Philly game, and she's from Philly. And it was when Lionel Hollins was coaching. And we sat there and we watched the interaction between Lionel and the players. And at the end of the game, she said, "This team is united in only one thing, their hatred of the coach." And I said, "This is a very perceptive woman."
Very perceptive woman. Very perceptive woman. On that note, we're gonna take our first break. When we come back, we'll talk to Bob a little bit more about Netsdaily, some of the craziest stories he's had from his years of coverage, and what he thinks the Nets can do in the future going beyond. We'll talk about more of that when we come back on the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. What's up, listeners? You know sometimes how it can be hard just to get from point A to point B. Now, when I have to get anywhere and I don't want to deal with the hassle of public transportation, it ain't hard to tell how I get around. I always make sure to use the best car service app in the game. I'm talking about Lyft. Lyft offers rides in minutes. All you have to do is download the Lyft app, request a ride, and you will be on your way quickly. Lyft is all about happy riders and happy drivers. Take a ride with them and you'll see why 9 out of 10 rides end up with a 5-star rating. Lyft always has amazing offers for new customers, and I'm here to tell our listeners about a great offer today. Lyft is currently offering free ride credit to Ain't Hard to Tell listeners. If you are new to Lyft, then you are eligible, and getting your credit is easy. All you have to do is download the app and use the promo code AHTTPOD to unlock your free credit today. Ain't hard to tell who has the best car app service, so use the code today and ride out loud with Lyft. best new sports web series is here. It's from Backpack Broadcasting, and it's called The Sports Walk. The Sports Walk is a series where diverse sports fans take a walk and share their views at the intersection of sports and society. The entire first season is now available on Backpack Broadcasting's YouTube channel and backpackbroadcasting.com. See what other sports fans have to say about a variety of issues in the world of sports. Watch all 13 episodes from season 1 and take the Sports Walk today. Welcome back to Ain't Hard to Tell Podcast, episode 34. Our guest today is Robert Windrem. He is the editor of Netsdaily.com and investigative reporter for NBC. And Bob, we were talking about this just now a little bit off when we were off on break, but one of the things that you do as an editor, somebody who contributes to the Netsdaily content, is when you go to games, you're sitting with the fans.
Yeah, well, I'm a season ticket holder now for it's 11 or 12 years, something like that. Before that, I had packages. But Dennis Lynn, no relation, and I have sat together for that entire time. And we started out in the Meadowlands, then we went to Newark, then we went to Barclays. So we have seen, the first year we had tickets, and the Nets were so desperate in New Jersey to sell season tickets, we paid $199 each for season tickets. They were in the next to last row.
What?
It's
the price that got me. I'm like, what? Okay.
We pay a bit more now.
Yeah, I think so. I would think so, yeah.
Right.
Wow, $199, next to last row.
Next to last row at the Meadowlands. Had to walk up 75 steps.
What year was this?
Let me see. This would have been...
It was 10, 11 years.
It would have been after... Yeah, but it was...
Vince Carter was there.
Yeah, it was Vince
Carter still on that team.
It was like 2007 or so, something like that.
Okay.
Well, it couldn't have been worse than, 2010?
No, nothing was worse than 2007.
I actually went to a lot of those games. I remember because I was in high school at the time. I had friends that would come up to me during school and be like, "Oh, Nets tickets are being sold for like 75 cents today." That was a real thing.
That was a real thing. That's exactly
How bad was it getting through? Because Bryan brings it up. How bad was it? I'm laughing. How bad was it getting through 2010?
It was, everybody had
And how
hope.
many games were you going to?
It was the Devin Harris show every night.
Yeah, was it worth your time, Bob?
Well, it was. I mean, it was. I live in New Jersey. I wasn't that far away, and and I love basketball, and I've always loved basketball, and and they were playing a lot of good teams, but it was it was very tough, and what held people together throughout that was the idea that you were going to get the first overall, number one pick. And then the lottery that night, that's when my son lost his fandom. He walked out of the room.
We went to the lottery party. Me and my brother did.
Right.
Where it was on the court. And they were going to announce who they picked. I remember that.
Yeah. Well, it was, and that was
didn't go very
Prokhorov's
well.
first, that was Prokhorov's first event, basically.
Huh.
I mean, he was there, and you may recall he was standing very stoically and unmoving when the Wizards won. And not only did he not get number one, they didn't get number two. They wound up with Derek Favors, who was the key piece in the Darren Williams trade. So there was some value there, but it was very, very tough because that was looked at basically as a one-player draft.
Yes.
And that John Wall was going to transform the point guard position. That was words that were used, that he was, once in a generation talent. He's a very good player, but he's not a once in a generation talent.
Yeah, those words were a bit much. Now
right. And so it was very disappointed that he didn't come. And of course, without getting into detail, if the Nets do wind up with John Wall, everything changes.
Yeah.
They don't wind up with Darren. They don't, and then they don't try to satisfy Darren by trying to sign Dwight Howard. Trading away the pick that became Damian Lillard, bringing in Joe Johnson in order to keep him around, and then of course the horror. Oh, the horror!
I want to get into the horror because a little bit about that.
I want to get into the horror too.
You're talking about 2010. You went back to a very dark time, and then how that didn't pan out for the Nets. We're getting that one overall pick. Could you, because I started working the first year they came to Brooklyn, so I think that's when
2012.
2012.
Damn.
What did you think about the move of them coming to Brooklyn?
I was all in favor of it, and I had a lot of people from Jersey who just hated me for it.
Because that's the vibe I had got before I started working in Netsdaily, talking to fans who lived in Jersey who were diehard Nets fans. I always got the impression like, no, we don't want to come to Brooklyn, we don't like it.
And they didn't. And there was much. What happened was one of the reasons why Bruce Ratner and Brett Yormark talked about a temporary parking garage. Was because they anticipated that the Nets fans would drive, and they didn't. The numbers were dramatically less than what they had. The numbers of Brooklyn fans who walked was greater, but the number of fans who were driving, and that's why there is no parking deck or anything like that at Barclays. Probably the only NBA arena like that. And so, but what happened was I was in favor of it for a number of reasons. I was in favor of it because it was New York. I was in favor of it because it would be their own arena. I was in favor of it because, you had to make some sort of change. And, and I'm still a season ticket holder. I mean, I work in New York, during the day. They're on weekdays, and then I'll take the subway down to Barclays and then make my way home through Penn Station. But, look.
Which is always interesting.
Oh, yeah. Night of the Living Dead.
Yes.
But not as bad as Port Authority.
No, not even close. Not even close.
No. But, yeah, so I was in favor of it. And I also just thought the idea that, remember, Meadowlands was voted annually the worst sports venue in America.
The worst.
The worst. It's closed now. They do commercials there.
Yeah. There's no sporting events happen in the Meadowlands. What became the Izod Center later on.
And they still call it the Izod Center, which is to Izod's benefit because they don't pay anymore. They don't. The naming rights. They stopped paying the naming rights years ago, but it's still the
there.
Wow.
Right. Still see.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah.
I want to
get into kind of like the rise of Netsdaily, so to speak, because I remember even back when it was starting, 13 years ago or whatever.
15.
15. Mm-hmm. So my brother was a season ticket holder from 2002, I believe, to 2013. As you said, the glory years.
The beginning of the
Jason Kidd and Vince Carter and all that fun stuff.
Yes, it was fun.
So I was put onto Netsdaily. This must have been 2005. So I was 11 years old.
I was not.
Neither was I. So
I'm showing my age. But, and to kind of see it now, I remember 2 years ago when Dexter suggested, writing for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I hadn't come across it in a while, but I knew what it was. I had no idea it was owned by SB Nation, that kind of thing.
Well, it was only owned by SB Nation. I think it's been 5 years, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't.
I think right when I came on, it was owned by SB Nation.
Yeah, because I couldn't.
It's like just before, maybe 6 years. It was just before the Brooklyn move.
So you've seen those kind of transformations, though. I guess take us through those 15 years of like how it's grown and how it's been different now.
It started basically as a news aggregation site. That was John's idea, and that's what we did. And we would do short intros, and then we would do the links, and we would have then ultimately we had the comments. But along the way, particularly around the time as the team was moving from New Jersey to Brooklyn, we just, we decided we should do our own stuff. We should try to break our own stuff, and we did a few times. And I wanted to move away from just being an aggregator. And what happened along the way as well was we were able to get a bigger audience. We were able to get more credibility with the team, and I thought that was helpful. I'd still like more. But I think
gonna ask
Give
about
us
that.
more credit,
Right.
credibility.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Do you feel like we as Netsdaily kind of get that respect that we should be getting?
I think we get the respect from the fan base.
No, but I actually agree with that. I think you do from the fan base.
Oh, fan base, yeah. Look, and that's what it's about. Look,
Yeah.
I don't make any money on this. He can tell you he doesn't make money either.
I haven't made much money off it. Yeah.
But we cheaped you out, pal.
Well, we'll get into that after.
Yeah, right.
Wait, what?
But no, look, it's.
We will.
There's a reason to do it. I mean, there are a number of reasons why people do it.
Yeah.
People do it because the love of the team.
Right.
People do it like Bryan and Pooch do it because it's part of their development as writers. And you did it, but video.
Yep.
But basically, the bottom line is it's about the team, and it's about the fan base. And it's the fan base changes. My God, I go back a few years and go through the kids who were kind of I shouldn't say kids because over the years I've learned not a lot of them are kids. And what you see is it changes, and and there have been moments where the site changed. I mean, one moment was the Dwight Mayer when he decided at the last minute to back out.
Was this the first Dwight Mayer?
No, there are 7. That was the second or third. And there were Dwight Mayers that nobody knew about.
Yeah. Or wants to know about, probably.
Right. But we had that day. That was our biggest day ever.
Of traffic.
Yes,
to
biggest
the site.
traffic. And when we got to when the Nets traded for Darren Williams, actually that's when we had just started with SB Nation. And to give you an idea of how the fan base can suddenly just congeal, and it crashed the SB Nation servers, all of them, not just when Darren Williams was traded, because it came out of nowhere, as you remember.
Yeah, I remember that.
I could not get into the site to create a story for almost a half hour because it just blown out. It's just blown out the servers at SB Nation.
Where were you? Because you have updated the site from
Anywhere and everywhere.
a lot of different
I
parts
know
of the
this.
world.
Like parts of the world I know where you've not even been here. And
We've
still
talked
stuff.
about off record.
I have updated the site from Tehran in Iran, Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, Rome. I've updated it from London. I've updated it from Paris. Trying to think. Tehran was my favorite update.
Was that the one with the where you were in the hotel and there was a guy?
Oh, that was Saudi. Yes,
Guy, guy doing what? I'm like, where's this going?
I'm in a hotel room on the 38th floor of the Kingdom Center in Riyadh.
In Riyadh,
All
okay, yes.
With a big floor to ceiling glass windows.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sitting in my pajamas at my desk, at the desk with my laptop, and I'm, and suddenly I look up, and there's a man descending down the window, and his face is covered. All I could see is his eyes, and he's descending, and I'm sitting there. Well, maybe I should pay attention to this.
Yeah. Was he doing a stunt for the next Mission Impossible
No,
movie?
he was a window washer.
So he had his little.
Yeah, he was. Well, I didn't know that initially. All I see
okay.
is him descend, and this is the 38th floor, and I'm saying we're in Riyadh.
Yeah.
And so I just I thought to myself, there's really no concern here. I mean, the sand gets on the window. They have sandstorms.
right.
They need to wash the windows, and
He's doing
I'll
that.
just continue, updating Netsdaily.
But you were on the 38th floor.
I was on the 38th floor. I was like 400 feet above the city. Yes.
And you did not expect that. I wouldn't have expected that.
No, it was
crying.
It's. I mean, but yeah, I've updated it from bizarre places, Honolulu, a lot of different places.
Do you remember what you were updating in Saudi Arabia? Like,
Let's see, it was
the Andre
2000
Blatch acquisition?
April 2000.
Exciting one.
April 2005. So that's when I was there.
That was the end of the season.
Yeah, it was the end of the season.
You kind of hit on this and talked about this, but and I'll say this: I met you, I think it was 2012, 2013.
By the way, I was working for NBC in Riyadh. I wasn't.
Yes, not right. You weren't just there.
I wasn't scouting some Saudi big man. Right.
No, that should have been noted.
Yes, exactly.
You talked about the opportunities Netsdaily has given, obviously, people like Bryan and Pooch, and then even myself when I came to you, because I found out about SB Nation through a friend of mine who did some stuff with the Wizards, and he's like, you should check out the site. Bob and I actually had a meeting at the Starbucks.
That's right, I'd forgotten that.
Right at the Barclays,
Okay.
And talked about the content we could do. And
You sent us a letter.
I sent you an email, and you got back to me very quickly. I remember that.
Video. Oh boy. Right.
Yeah, he was like, video, like, let's do it. And then we met, and we talked about it. I will say here, and I've said this to you before, but thank you for that opportunity, because it allowed me
for
to,
us. I mean, one of the things that people forget. I mean, one of the great moments of Netsdaily, exclusive moments of Netsdaily.
Darren Williams dodgeball.
No.
Oh, let's not go to that.
We're not going.
We're gonna have to bring a video for that.
I love bringing that up.
Please,
Oh, God.
please. This is a much better story. The Joe Jesus comment by Kevin Garnett
Yeah, I
was
remember that.
ours exclusively.
And you know what's
we have
funny?
the only video of that.
You know what's funny? I'll never forget that night, because I was in the Nets locker room, and and all the other TV stations left. Nobody wanted to wait around. Something told me, stay around. You're waiting for KG to talk. KG talks. He says that. As soon as he said that, I turned to Tom Lorenzo and I said, yo, we got to put that up. Like that
Yo,
clip,
man, right now.
Like that clip has to go up now.
150,000 page views. One of the highest, one of the biggest
And views
studs.
on YouTube, I think within like a day or 24 hours was at like 20, 30,000.
Yeah.
And by the end of the week, it was at 70,000.
Yeah.
I remember that. Insane. Because Tom was like, you sure? I'm like, people are going to love this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to love this. They're going to love this Joe Jesus comment.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that was crazy.
it became his nickname. It became part of not just Nets lore, but Joe Johnson lore.
It's memed now.
Crazy to think I'm responsible. I'm somewhat responsible.
No, you're not
for that.
somewhat
I shot
responsible.
it,
You're
I put it up.
responsible for
That's
it.
kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And it stuck after that.
Yeah,
It
speaking
stuck,
of
you're right.
speaking of not getting proper credit,
Well, no, and the point of what I was trying to do before we go to break is I was trying to give Bob the credit too of being able to give people opportunities like that within the world of journalism,
Right.
because
Minorities too.
that yes, and Bob, we've talked about this before. That is important,
Yeah.
and you've done that.
Look,
Whether it's
it's-
myself, Pooch, Bryan, and we are grateful.
Brian Florentine,
Bryan Florentine, yep.
who does two things for us. He does the game previews,
Mm-hmm.
and then occasionally he will do stories on the social aspects of
He does a great job.
basketball, which he should do more of, because every time he writes them, he's terrific. And Brian's a very interesting guy. He's from Canarsie.
Yep.
He has 2 bachelor's degrees. He's getting a master's degree. He's a social worker. He takes care of old people. I mean, he's a wonderful, wonderful human being. And and look, there are reasons for doing this with people. It's not eleemosynary. It's not charitable. It's
Right.
it's helping the site. It's giving the site a diverse group of writers and videographers, and I think that that's important, because to have people from, again, I'm from New Jersey, but to have people from like you from Brooklyn,
Yep.
like you from Queens, like Pooch from the island, like Bryan from Canarsie. I mean, those are the sorts of things that gives a certain level, and also the backgrounds of people. You played
Yep.
ball.
Yep.
Pooch played ball.
Yep.
I did too.
And you did?
Yeah, high
Oh,
school.
okay. Right. But we'll leave that unattended.
I have photos
Yeah.
with braids and with an
He
afro.
always talks about these photos, but doesn't
Certain
bring them
things
for
I
us.
don't
have
ever
to go
need to
find
see.
them.
See, Bob doesn't want to see them either.
I have to
There
go
you
find them, but they are.
Please
No,
don't.
they can say where they are.
Please,
They can
right.
say where they are.
Yeah. But no, look, the site has its own life.
Right.
I mean, how long am I going to do it? I will reveal to you that I'm 73 years old. I don't know how much longer I'm going to do it. But I had this big Meshuggah moment about how long am I going to do this? How long am I going to do NBC? And then I just said, if I can do it, I'll do it. And if I can't do it, well, then I'll say it's over. And I have a history of in my life of saying, it's over now, and I'll walk away. But I think, although I have been at NBC for 38 years,
it's crazy. We're gonna get into that in the next segment. That's crazy. That's insane. Yeah, let's break right there. We're gonna come back. We're gonna talk to you about NBC and how long you've been there and how much. Well, you said you'll know when it's done. We'll talk more about that. We come back on Ain't Hard to Tell Sports. I was gonna say Sports Walk. Ain't Hard to Tell
Guru
podcast.
is the place where fans talk about sports via video. All videos are 60 seconds or shorter. Sports Guru makes the video look more professional and fun by adding automated on-screen graphics. You can follow your favorite sports by team, trending, new, or by people you follow, and more. Type in the title of your video and it will auto-magically go into your on-screen graphics. It's just that simple. Tag your teams and publish sports. Let's talk sports.
It ain't hard to tell where to get the latest merchandise from Backpack Broadcasting. Gear is now available via TeePublic. Visit the Backpack Broadcasting TeePublic online store to get shirts, hoodies, mugs, and phone cases. Represent your favorite Backpack Broadcasting shows, including the Sports Walk, Sideline Stories, and of course, the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. Check out the special offers for our podcast listeners at http://t.pub/lic/backpack. Get in the game with your official Backpack Broadcasting gear today. All right, welcome back to the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast, episode 34. Our guest, Robert Windrem, Netsdaily, NBC Investigative Reporter. You talked to us about your time at NBC, your crazy story, seeing the window washer down, and other
It's
things.
Saudi Arabia. You can't leave that part out.
Saudi Arabia, yes. Not that he was here in the States, and you've been everywhere. You've seen a lot in journalism. There's a lot you've told us. We're all sitting here as journalists. You've been doing it for, what did you say, 38, 39 years?
I've been at NBC it'll be 38 years in August.
The first question I have to ask for anybody who's done anything that long, clearly you have to love it or you're just suffering.
Most days.
Yes.
No, look, I'm very fortunate. I will not step back from.
How much do you love the investigate? Because I think in people who are investigative journalists, any journalism is a great art too, but investigative journalism is, you really dig deep. You're working on pieces. You're working sources.
You get moments. There are moments when suddenly it either comes together or suddenly you call somebody and they say, "Yeah, I have that document. I've been waiting for your phone call for years." That literally happened to me.
That's a phone call.
And
How did you feel after that?
I was on a plane to Minneapolis the next day. I have that document. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Can I have it? Yes, you can. All right, see you tomorrow. But yeah, there are moments like that, but a lot of it is also just making phone calls and developing sources and trying in your head to think, wait a minute, I know somebody who could help on this. Somebody who's just a little off. I haven't thought about him or her in this relationship with this story, and maybe I should call them. And and it works, and that's fun. And it's also the collaborative aspect to it. Television is very collaborative, as you know.
Yes.
Yes.
You have to. You need other people.
Yes.
Yes.
And the internet is collaborative, and you need good editors. You need good cameramen. You need other reporters. And, it's interesting because when people make the transition from print, where you basically need a notepad, and maybe a tape recorder or, an iPad or iPod or iPhone, it's different. And, and I did come from print, and it's been, the collegiality of it. And NBC is a wonderful place. August of 1980, I walk in the door.
Still there.
And Jimmy Carter was president. Ronald Reagan was running for president, and
We weren't born.
he wasn't born. And
My older sister wasn't born.
right, and the hostages were still in Iran, the Iranian hostages. So it was, I've gone through a lot of different things, and I've met a lot of big people.
What's the craziest, in your opinion?
Yeah.
What's the craziest story you've worked on where it was just insane to either be there or to get the story told? Because those are two different things that are hard. But what's the?
How about a
craziest
day
story?
at Chernobyl?
nuclear reactor site that's now. Go Google some pictures of Chernobyl so you can see it now. Google some pictures of Chernobyl so you can see what that.
I spent the day at Chernobyl.
Really?
It's about 150 feet away from the reactor, and that was.
What were you wearing to make sure?
A lovely spring jacket.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
It was quite nice.
Yeah.
My wife made me burn it, and we haven't had any children since. But no, that's about the wildest. And it was on a tour we did of the Soviet Union, and but it was, I mean, we talked to people who had been evacuated, and there was this small town, there was something called an exclusion zone that nobody could live in because the radiation levels were so high. And but there were these older people who had been in this town, and they permitted them to go back. And they were all like in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, so they let them stay there. And that was strange.
Did you talk to those people?
Oh, yeah, of course.
What did they say?
They wanted cigarettes. They bummed cigarettes off us.
Interesting.
But not that I smoke.
Yeah.
But it was. I mean, they talked about. What have we got to lose? We're old, and and we don't want to leave our houses, and some of the younger people wound up on collective farms, and I mean, and they had a cleanup cruise that it was so silent that they had to pump classical music into the town that surrounded it, so that people wouldn't go crazy. And there was, Russian classical music playing everywhere from loudspeakers. It was bizarre.
That is bizarre.
But that's that's probably the most bizarre. I mean, I've also flown on and off aircraft carriers and hunted for subs and was on a submarine on a mission and was under nuclear sub and, fun stuff like that.
Right. It's fun.
How have you seen sort of like reporting change through like social media now, because the lines are more blurred?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because social media is very good for breaking news. It is not good for much else. I mean, you still want, if you want an in-depth look, social media is not going to give you that, but it does give you video. It can give you live video. It can give you live streams. It can give you a sense of what's happening now. And the combination of that and cable, it makes it. When I started, there was no cable television. I mean, CNN had gone on the air 3 weeks before I started at NBC. So it was brand new, and nobody. It was chicken noodle news. That's what it was called by the people at the networks. Yeah. And and then they became what they became. But I think the big thing that has changed from the day that I walked in to now was women. The presence of women, not just in the newsroom, but ultimately in the boardrooms. When I came to NBC, there were 2 women on the staff, on the production staff. One of them was the mistress of the executive producer, and the other woman was producer. She's still there. There were no blacks. There were no openly gay people. There were no Asians. And this is This is not 1967. This is 1980. And this is NBC nightly news, and that's what it was. I mean, it was a bunch of white guys, and the women were all researchers. There was one working producer, and all the males, and then in the research area, it was all women except for one guy. So I mean, there was this segregation of the genders, but that's the biggest difference. And until recently, the president of NBC News was a woman. So I mean, I've seen the whole gamut. But that's the biggest change.
What do you feel? Because you do investigative reporting and sometimes some long form reporting. And I've talked to you a little about this as well too. There always has been this thing that people, especially now in the social media age, don't want to watch longer form reporting, don't care about that, it's going to die. To that you say?
To that I say things change all the time. And I think that the more younger people get involved in, for the want of a better term, the political culture, there's going to be a greater interest. And I mean, you've seen that develop around the big issues of the time about gun control, about the Trump presidency. I mean, and now about immigration. I mean, people now have a greater hunger for this. And a lot of it is still talking heads, and it's and it's Twitter and it's Facebook and a lot of other things. But people now have a greater curiosity, I think. And the ratings, the news magazines do quite well. They make money.
Yep.
And they have a younger audience than the evening news programs. They have the cable audiences are younger, but except for Fox, where the median age is 68, so their audience is literally dying.
Yep.
Like baseball fans.
Something like that.
Yeah. Well done, Bryan.
Right, like baseball fans. And so I mean, but yeah, it's a whole different. And look, who knows what it's going to be like in 5 or 10 years.
You're right. No, and I'll get to Bryan in a second. I know nobody knows, but I also wanted to mention. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 summers ago. I sent you an email and I asked you. I said, "Hey, I want to transition from doing more local reporting.
I wanted you to bring this up. Yeah.
More correspondent, long form reporting." And you gave me, and I don't know if I've ever even said this to you. You gave me probably the best advice you could have given me at the time. And you said, do it yourself. Go do this long form sports reporting that you want to do yourself. And I have. And I've done Sideline Stories. So the piece I did with Dinwiddie and other stuff we worked on. Bryan and I just did a series of boxing. What I've seen in that, and I kind of wanted to respond to what you said, is I think the interest is still there from people. I think as long as you make the pieces interesting.
People. Yeah, and it's, I mean, look, you can't look at the audience as, just, one, one general, one,
right.
One monolithic audience. You can't look at it that way. It's, especially nowadays, it's much more fragmented.
Great.
And it's fragmented for a lot of different reasons. It's in a lot of different ways. I mean, it's fragmented by age. It's fragmented by race and gender. By LGBT. There's various and sundry different audiences out there, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing in sports. I mean, there's soccer fans, and there's basketball fans, and there's college basketball fans, and there's women's basketball fans. One of the kids who we had writing a few years ago, Danny Lagudice, I think that's how it's pronounced. He wrote a few pieces for us. He was actually the pizza delivery kid, and I noticed he was a Nets fan. And I said, "You're a journalism student. Why aren't you writing? You should be writing for us." And he did. And now his specialty at the Asbury Park Press is women's sports. And so there's a lot of different niches out there.
Agreed.
And you can't satisfy everybody. You shouldn't try to satisfy everybody. You should just try to satisfy standards, no matter how you tell it.
That's great advice.
Well, just write it down.
There you go.
Well, this is stuff that Dexter also says kind of regularly, just in different ways.
And as far as a content creator, I happen to believe in that. Like, I don't think you can satisfy everybody in the content you create. Like, this podcast isn't for everybody. Some episodes we do, some people are going to really like, some people aren't going to like. Somebody might not like Bob as a guest, they might not like the hat he's wearing. Personally, I don't really care. I'm just saying that they're different. Anybody can not like something for any reasons.
And look, and getting back to the reason why we all know each other, the Nets, which is people like the direction they're going, people don't like the direction they're going. I mean, it is what it is. But I'm a season ticket holder. I invest a lot of time on the website editing his copy.
Come on, Bryan, make it easier.
Why's it gotta be mine, man?
Right. No, and you just have to. You have to have faith, and you have to. I'm sort of amazed that I was able to get through certain periods, and not just say, "To hell with it."
Oh, like the 10-win season.
10-win season wasn't that bad.
really.
No, I mean, there was
sounds
worse
bad.
situations.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would think so because it's 10 wins in an 82-game season. But I guess so. What were some of those periods?
Oh, the horror.
Do tell.
The Boston trade.
That when you said the horror, that's where I felt like we were going. We haven't even touched on that much yet. So
No, I mean, look, I know I was aware in real time. I'm not going to get into how I know it, but I was aware in real time of what was happening. And that story that was in the Ringer, where the owner of the Boston Celtics said he kept going back to Danny and saying, "Give me another pick, give me another pick." That's true.
And Billy King was serving up picks.
Yeah, well, it was Billy. And
So from the time you heard it, how long did it take for you to actually believe it? Because it didn't
Oh,
sound
no.
like
Look, this is what I knew. Remember, the draft's always on a Thursday. And as I said, real-time knowledge around lunchtime. And on what people didn't know at that point was on Tuesday night, they had agreed to a very narrow and smart deal, which was Paul Pierce for Chris Humphries and the 2016 first-round pick.
Yeah.
Unprotected.
harmless.
Yeah. I mean, I had always loved Paul Pierce. I thought he was, he was somebody. You want to talk about somebody who's not that athletic, but had a great career. And I always loved that about him. And then they got greedy. And then they wanted KG, and they only wanted to give up one pick. Then they decided they would give up 2 picks, and they didn't want Jason Terry in the deal. And then they Jason Terry. Then there was a 3rd pick. Then Gerald Wallace, and
I don't remember. I remember being.
I was at that press conference, by the way.
You were?
So was I.
Them.
So was I. Yeah.
I was there.
My brother was there.
You interviewed me afterward.
I did.
And I said they have a 1-year window.
You know what's funny? I was just about to go there
right.
because I was saying I didn't remember your feelings on the trade, and I think I remember telling you I wasn't thrilled about it. I didn't think it was that great.
I think I've written about this on the website, which is we had 2,459 comments on the trade.
And only one.
And there was one guy who said, "This is crazy. Giving up all these picks, this is nuts. This is a bad deal." And everybody going, "Yeah, you're crazy. This is
I don't know what that says about the Nets fan base, but
It says
I've tried to find him.
Prophet.
I went back. I've tried to find him, bring him back.
we gotta find him. We gotta bring him.
We're like, tell us more.
I'm Ryder, right?
That's
He's right.
Before he was right. 2
He's
things.
the only one right, though.
He's the only
Yeah,
one.
the only one. And he's
I was lucky.
he's
I
a hero.
wasn't on the board that night. Because I was wrapping up the draft coverage.
How did you think it was going to go? Did you? Because I remember my
Yeah.
brother being a Net fan. He thought they were going to win 60 wins the next
Yeah, I
season.
know. I mean, look,
lot of people
initially I had doubts because I knew that they hadn't given up. I knew I knew where it started and where it had gone, and I was like 3 picks plus a swap. But then, like everybody else, I bought into it, and I said, "Well, let's give it a
You had
shot."
no alternative.
No, at that,
Yeah,
and
that's
that's and to a certain degree, that's it. I mean, what's your choice? You can either say, "All right, I'll stop becoming a fan.
right.
I won't buy my season tickets. I'll quit my Netsdaily job," and but I decided not to do that because you always want to see. I'm a reporter. You always want to see what's around the next bend. You want to see how's this going to work out. And of course, suddenly at the season began, and they were like, "Oh my God, they were horrible."
Yep.
And one of the reasons why they were horrible, by the way, is they were all out of shape, which is not something that's talked about. I mean, Paul Pierce's reputation was he will play his way into shape, and everybody accepted that. KG's reputation was that he would work his ass off during the summer and come in. He didn't that summer. Andrei Kirilenko, who people forget was also on that team.
The greatest nickname ever.
Right, AK-47.
Nickname that probably wouldn't fly today, but yeah.
He proudly said he hadn't touched the basketball all summer because it was the first summer that he had off from his national team commitments.
Yep.
And he went to Saint-Tropez, where he had a place on the French Riviera, and spent time with his kids, and came in, and what happened? He had back spasms, and he was out and that was it for him.
Was that
Career
before or after the back tattoo?
It was after the back tattoo. I don't know if there's a relation. There may be. Who knows? Too much extra weight.
But we got here because we were talking about those times where it was basically almost over for Netsdaily. So I guess when did that kind of come in?
Well, I think that as the realization dawned that
This wasn't going to work.
this isn't going to work, and then the kid thing at the end of the year, and where he and Billy had the power struggle, and
That was crazy.
that was crazy, and it was. I mean, they had the press conference in April or June, May, right after the season was over.
Yep.
They had a press conference over at Sunset Park.
Yep.
Where they announced that they were building the training facility.
Yep, I was there
And
that
Kidd
day.
was taking questions about what was going to happen next year. What was he looking forward to next year? When he had already agreed to the buyout.
He was, and we didn't. I remember that because we did good coverage that day, and I interviewed Irina and you. We did all this stuff. I remember that, and I found it out later, and I was just like, "Wow, the kid stuff was crazy."
Yeah, the kid stuff was insane. And again, and then suddenly, things really start to. Then they bring in Lionel Hollins. Excuse me. How could I forget? And it was, and that was like. That's the reason why Billy was fired. Billy was fired not because of the screw up with the Boston trade, was because he brought in Lionel without real. He was pushing hard to bring Lionel in, and they hated him. The Russians hated him.
Yeah, we know he didn't get along with.
He didn't get along with many people.
Many people. There.
And and I think that was. I mean, that there's like an insidious effect as each one of these things build and build and build and build, and then finally you realize you're at the bottom. They fire Billy, they fire Lionel, and then they almost screwed up the Sean Marks hiring, if you remember, because there was the one day, and they basically lowballed him.
Yeah.
After he had agreed to accept the deal, and then he arrives and he sees what has to be done, and they have assets, but nobody wants to play there. And one of the reasons why nobody wants to play there is because the future looks so bad. What Steve Kerr said was, this may have been the worst hand dealt to any GM in NBA history.
I don't. And this is the last thing we're going to do before we wrap up that I want to ask. With all that being said, you just went through the history, the trade, everything's happened. Mark's here now as a fan and contributor to Netsdaily. How do you feel about the future of this franchise as we're prepared for the offseason here in 2018 and we go into the 2018-2019 season? Is the future bright for the Brooklyn Nets?
The future is long.
When somebody says the future is long, not bright, that means
It's long.
It's long.
Look, I'm not saying
that means we're seeing glimmer of hope in the
There'll
light.
be a dynasty in
It's
5
not dark.
years.
No, it's not dark, but it's there's real issues. I mean, there's talent issues, and now they have their picks, and they have a new owner who is extremely patient because he's not gonna take control to 2021. I mean, it's gonna take a long time.
Nets fans don't want to hear that though, Bob.
Of course they don't. Nobody wants to hear that. But it's going to take a long time. Now, Marx has said, and Atkinson has said, that the fan base has been great because they've been so patient. And that's true. But, they're 29th in attendance.
Yep, and they need people to start showing up, and they need at least a player that can get people in the buildings that they want to see. That's I think that's a little bit of the problem.
Well, when Vince Carter came in after they had dumped, it led to a increase of 5,500 season ticket holders because Vince Carter was at the height of his powers. He was spectacular. He came in. People thought that he was done because of what had happened, and suddenly he explodes. I mean, that's how you sell tickets. Is there anybody on the team now like that? No,
not even close.
D'Angelo has that talent, but he's not clearly not
there's
there
nobody-
yet. And he hasn't stayed healthy in his 3 NBA seasons.
Right.
He's been in the league.
I can say as bad as my Knicks are, if Porzingis is healthy, people want to come and see him play.
Yeah.
They don't. The Nets need to find that
Look,
kind of play.
D'Lo has the potential to do that.
He does.
He has the potential to do that. He has that court vision. He has that swagger. I mean, and that was part of Vince Carter. Vince had a swagger, and Jason had a swagger in a very different way.
Yes.
And Kenyon Martin had real swagger.
You didn't want to mess with Kenyon Martin.
And
Right.
people gravitated towards that. Do I think that at the end of the day, it's going to work? I think so. But the other thing is, you can make a mistake, and it gets set back. I mean, and the mistake may have nothing to do with your thinking. Somebody gets hurt. Somebody has a problem, has other problems, and
Right.
and they can't make it work, and and whatever. But everybody has faith, and God love them, for having faith in Sean Marks and Kenny Atkinson, and and now the patience of ownership, and it is very patient. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. On the other hand, what you can look at what Sam Hinkie said, and I was not a big fan of his, but what he said is, when you build something like this, it's not necessarily incremental. You can do one thing and it suddenly vaults the organization into a whole different orbit, or the reverse.
Yep.
Yeah, and you're still not there. What Prokhorov and Joe Tsai, the new minority owner, want is they want to be patient so that at the end of the process, dare I use that phrase, they have a organization that will be a perennial championship contender.
Right.
That's their plan. But is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 7 years? I've heard all those numbers.
Well, we know
Don't
it's not
know.
now because they're buying out Dwight Howard. And
Well, we know. Yeah, it isn't
That's
about
somebody who,
well,
for better or worse, would probably help you win some games.
Yep, but like Bob said,
But they're gonna get
the future.
the cap.
The
cap
future
space.
is long.
We're not to expect anything big to happen over the next few weeks in free agency,
We aren't.
are we?
Ooh.
I am.
You are.
I think they're going to do something big. Yeah, I don't know if it's
But
going
what's
to work.
big though? Like, see, this is where the lines kind of get blurred because
But I mean, I'm not saying Bob knows pretty.
I think they're going
it's
to do
just that
something. Like last year, Damari Carroll and Alan Crabb. I don't know if those
Big could
count
just
as
be-
big,
big could
but
just
that
be
came
having
out
the
of
cap
nowhere.
space.
That came out of
It
nowhere.
could. We'll see.
Dwight Howard came out of
So
nowhere. I just was
you
like,
expect them to be. We're not saying it's active in free agency, but they could do something.
I expect that on July 6th, we're going to have a very big day.
Oh,
Oh, I can't wait.
I mean,
No.
look, do I know? No. I just see certain, you understand the history. You've been doing it for a long time. You hear what they say, and
see
they're
how
not
certain
saying
things are
directly.
moving. Right.
Yeah, and you say to yourself, they've got something going here.
all right. Well, you know what? I'm going to leave it on that note.
Yeah.
That
I
on
just want-
July
I
I
6th,
gotta sit up.
there could be.
You know,
a
I
big
just want
day.
some interest.
Yeah.
End it with
That clip is going to be teased with you saying that. We're going to use that. That's fine. No problem. Bob, thank you for coming on. We want to thank you so much for coming on. Always
My
a
pleasure.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. That is Bob Windrem. He is the editor for Netsdaily.
I'm going to send you something.
Investigative
to edit after
reporter
this.
for NBC. That's it for episode 34 of the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. We'll be back next time. Thanks for listening, watching us. Peace.